Hey, what's going on? Thank you for tuning into this episode of While We Were Working. We've got a fun show for you today. We are talking about what's keeping HR up at night in this year. And we're talking about how our candidates using AI to cheat the recruiting process and what employers should do about it. I'm Joey Price, one of your hosts here on the While We Were Working show. And I'm joined as always with Sommer Ketron, our consulting practice manager here at Jumpstart HR. Sommer, how's it going?
It's always great over here, Joey. I can't complain. I love, having some time each week to do our show and talk about really cool topics to share with the people leader community. But how are things over there with you?
Not too bad. I agree with you. It's always good to study up on things and give our thoughts to our peers and to managers who want to be better people leaders. And this week, we've got, two pretty interesting topics. And if you're a manager who typically listens to this, you want to tune into the what's keeping HR up at night conversation, because ultimately it's going to impact your job. And then definitely you want to stick around in Consultant's Corner as we talk about how candidates are using AI to trick the recruitment process, because you don't want to get got. I can tell you a fun story, but I'll save it for later, though. We'll go ahead. We'll jump into While We Were Working. And Summer, do you mind setting up the article and our conversation on it today?
I'd love to. Thanks, Joey. And as always, thanks everybody for joining this week's show. We're excited you're here. And as Joey promised, we have some amazing topics you won't want to miss. The first one is the While We Were Working segment, where Joey and I scour the internet. We read blogs, magazines, anything we can find to pluck out the most interesting topic to talk about on our show. And coming from our good friends over at HR Executive, there was a survey that they did called What's Keeping HR Up at Night. And, Joey, you and I are always on a lot of prospect calls. And what is the number one question that I love to ask?
What's keeping you up at night?
What's keeping you up at night? So, of course, this article caught my attention because I feel like that's such a powerful question, right? Because it cuts past all of the clutter to what is one or some of the most important things that if we were able to help with as a consulting firm would have a significant and meaningful difference in the work that the company is doing. So here we are talking about the survey of what's keeping HR execs up at night. And I think we're ready to jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it. So let's go last place first. So tied for last place are, I should set context. There are the top 10 responses that were shared. And we may not get to all of them, but for the purpose of this conversation, we're just going to talk about some and give some context. So navigating HR budgets and then managing hybrid remote workplaces. It's keeping people up at night. I would imagine with navigating HR budgets, you're probably thinking about training and development, thinking about recruiting costs and how to manage those. You're thinking about compensation strategy and how to offer competitive wages. That can keep you up at night because costs have fluctuated and it's super important to get a handle on not only your budget, but the performance of your business as well. And then obviously something we live in day in and day out is talking about the hybrid and remote workplace, the legal compliances, using remote as an attraction tool, how to keep people motivated in a hybrid work environment, so on and so forth. There's a lot to think about.
One of the items that really caught my attention, because it's been such a huge focus over the last year, has been that top talent recruitment and retention actually moved down from the primary challenge, and it dropped from approximately 47% of respondents to 36%. And when I think about like what factors contribute to that, I think one, it's just a slower hiring market, but it's also doubled by the uncertain economy.
Yeah, it's do you think people have just given up hope, or what are your thoughts?
I don't think that they've given up hope. I just think that the landscape in terms of hiring has changed. And with that, I think leaders are having to look at, okay, what are other strategies that we need to deploy? And I think they've shifted their attention to different strategies that is reflected in the survey. And I think just one of them is building company culture and learning development have kind of risen in greater importance than previous, and leadership training. And that's something that I'm actually see play out in real time as we're working with our clients. You know, they're asking for more training, specifically managerial, like leadership training, executive coaching, DISC training. So I think it's really cool to see. We get to see it kind of play out in real time, but also seeing some of the data that backs it up. Like, I think it's pretty spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to take a look at for what's keeping HR up at night is the piece here that is 14% improving employee engagement. I think that's just going to be one that's always on the list and always in the top 10, because typically HR knows that great workplace requires great employee engagement. Without it, you experience greater turnover, lower productivity, fewer people wanting to work at your organization. So it makes recruiting harder. So it's one of those like maintenance things that you should always be thinking of. So I'm not surprised that it landed somewhere in that top 5, but it's definitely something that we should always be thinking about. And for the managers who are listening to this conversation, aren't in HR, you know, you play a role in that employee experience piece too. So whether it's, being a better communicator, whether it's like setting appropriate goals, everybody has a part to play in the employee experience equation. And it would be great for your company, for you and other of your peers to know, what part do I play in making this a great place to work, and how can I help move the needle? So talk to your HR team. If you have no HR team, talk to us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to take away from this survey. And, I think it gives a little bit of a roadmap of, if I'm a HR or, a people leader, somebody who is, maybe not quite certain where to focus efforts. I think sometimes, looking at the surveys of like, okay, well, what are other folks focusing on? And, maybe that's a starting point for starting to think through what the organization's individual needs are. Because if you see that, say, 36% of survey respondents are saying that, hiring and retaining key talent is their biggest challenge, then, you can look at this and say like, okay, well, does that apply to us? Yes or no? And then, if yes, recognize that, a third or so of folks are likely encountering the same challenge. So how do you move yourself to the other kind of 2/3 of that pie, right? I'm always thinking about competitive advantage and what are your competitors doing? So I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. Well, let's cover one more. This is a really great list. I would say it's interesting that in the top 10 is people analytics. And I know that it's incredibly important. And people analytics, obviously, is the data around different aspects of employment, different aspects of employee satisfaction, different aspects of just basically the same way that you have data analytics. People analytics is the analytics of people data. So without boring people or going into the weeds on it, what I would say is that I am I am hopeful and excited to see that this is something that keeps a lot of HR executives up at night, because we are integrating technology more and more into the equation of how HR is done and how work is done. And one of those natural complements to understanding technology is understanding the data about your people, because the technology will help you produce the data. So I am excited to see that people analytics made the top 10. I would argue maybe it should be further along in the front end of the top 10 as opposed to the lower ranking. But truly, Peter Drucker says you can only manage what you measure. And to make really good decisions about your people, you've got to know the data. So that's something I tell students. That's something I tell colleagues. And I'll tell you on this pod, you can only measure or manage what you measure regarding the HR outcomes in your business. So good to see that on the list.
Yeah, you make a really great point there. And, I saw it and I was actually surprised that it was on the list as low as it was. But I understand that, I love to say there's bigger fires that HR is likely putting out. And it's not that it's not important, but some burn a little hotter than others. And well, when you're in the people business, data, I think naturally tends to fall a little lower. So
yeah.
All
right. Well, let's go and put a bow on this one. So obviously there are stuff keeping HR up at night. And if you have no HR team, you should be concerned, because these are things that professionals know are important and they're thinking about. So who's thinking about those in your business? You should reach out to Jumpstart for our dedicated team, whether it's a subscription to have a dedicated partner from month to month to month, or to work with us on a as needed basis through our prepaid consulting time. Check us out at jumpstart-hr.com to learn more about our offerings, and you can sign up for a free 15-minute consult with Summer or myself to see how we can be a good fit. We can hear Summer say, what's keeping you up at night? So let's go ahead and get into our Consultants Corner. And Consultants Corner is our view from the trenches of life as an HR pro, the good, the bad, the ugly, all things in between. And this week we have a question that says, I'm seeing more candidates use AI to write cover letters and resumes. It's becoming more difficult to identify a qualified candidate on paper. What are companies doing to adapt to this? Now, before we jump into this, let's have story time with Joey. Okay, so story time with Joey on this very topic. This, unlike last week's episode, where we talked about a person being in jail and not showing up for work, and I hadn't seen that in my career. I've seen this in my career. Okay, so what happened was we had a customer reach out to us, or prospect reach out to us and say, hey, we need to do a termination, and we're just not quite sure what to do. We're caught so off guard. Summer, they were really concerned. They're like, this person, they were perfect on paper. They seem to have all the right qualifications. We don't know where it went wrong. And of course, we ultimately worked with them, did some digging. Looked like, it appeared to us, it appeared to our consultant, that the person that they hired looked great on paper, because all that person did to create their cover letter was use, some AI tool to put the job description in the tool and say, can you write a cover letter for this role? So of course they're going to look good on paper when the cover letter lines up exactly for what you're needing in the job description. So this is just one story of a person who lasted no more than 3 months with the company, because ultimately they were found out. but it's making a recruiter's job harder. It's making hiring managers' jobs harder when we're used to looking at paperwork and making an assessment on paperwork. Now it seems like candidates understand how to get really good resumes, cover letter, portfolio things. So what do you do? And I've done a long intro. So Summer, maybe you can start with some thoughts and then I'll come back. But what are some other ways maybe that you're seeing, candidates using AI tools and such, or what should hiring manager, HR do to reduce that impact?
It's a very real challenge for recruiters and hiring managers. And I'm here to say it's not going away. So it's time for us to adapt our processes. And I've actually seen this firsthand. And so I recognize it is a real problem. So I think there's kind of two components to this that come to mind. One is advice for the job seeker. The other is, advice for hiring managers and, our friends in the talent community. But I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is, if I'm a hiring manager, to start to brush up on what these look like. And I'd hate to say it, but the reality is, if somebody just takes the job description or job posting and tosses it into Chat GPT or similar with an average prompt, if you know what it looks like, you know what it looks like. So do yourself a favor, if you haven't already, familiarized yourself with these tools, to go out and play with them. Because I'm not saying I'm 100% accurate, but if you gave me a stack of resumes, I could more than likely put them in two piles of likely used AI and likely original content. Now, I think that's going to be harder to do as folks become more skilled with writing prompts, right? But also individuals that may use AI as a tool, but still write original content. And I think that's where I'm seeing applicants take the easy path, right? Cut and paste job posting, cut and paste results, maybe a couple edits. But there are some real indicators. One is, does it look too good to be true? That should be your first. Well, let me see. Let me look further. The second is the language and sentence structure. It's usually wordy. It's usually, I don't want to say flamboyant, but the language, like the way that these tools construct sentences, is not how most applicants write. Do you know where I'm going with this, Joey?
Yeah. And the thing is with using a tool like this, it can be very clear once you get in front of an applicant and chat with them, whether or not there was some assistance with their application. And assistance is not a crime, right? Assistance is not wrong. So this is not a question about is a candidate good or bad based on their cover letter. The question is, are we getting a true sense of the person through the application process? And, the cover letter might be their foot in the door because they might have impressed us, or they rated high on our algorithms for the applicant tracking system. But that makes those conversations all the more important. It makes the interview questions that you ask all the more important. It makes being an active listener in the interview process that much more important. And if you offer the opportunity to do presentations or create a sample trial thing or to administer a test, it makes all those things more important. And unfortunately, those aren't the things that scale as much as, being able to read paperwork quickly and make a decision. But that's just the nature of the world that we're in right now with respect to using AI. I would argue that, crafting a resume or cover letter that is inauthentically an inauthentic reflection of you is probably unethical. It's subjective, but that's the nature of where we are right now. That's the situation we're in. So recruiters have to work harder, hiring managers have to work harder, employers have to work harder to make sure that the right person is getting the opportunity.
Yeah, I think in addition to what you've said, as a recruiter, one of the things that I think about is, you're losing the personalization of what makes you you. So if you have a lot of candidates who are using this and the output is, kind of in the same, like a general bucket, right? You're losing what makes you special, right? Because AI isn't going to be able to do that with, just zero modification. And I think about, gosh, if I was to apply for a job and use the results right out of AI, I feel like that would set such a high bar and high expectation that may not be the same as my actual skills, right? Because it's not me truly writing it. That why would you set the bar higher than what you could realistically achieve? Like, to me, that's just not setting the candidate up for success. But as a hiring manager, it makes me think about some of the things that you may want to consider. And I tried this about 10 years ago, maybe 12 at this point. I think it was probably a little too early on to fully be embraced, but it's the idea of on-demand video interviews one way. So now, kind of in this time where, you need to get a sense for, is the person on paper actually the person in real life? I think those one-way video interviews to start are a really great tool because, let's face it, it's pretty hard to fake it in person versus faking it on paper. So that's one thing that I would definitely explore further. If you're dealing with a high volume of candidates and you can't necessarily screen them all by, kind of traditional means.
Yeah. It's it means that it's very rare that we will not have something to do in the recruiting world, because it's this challenge today, it'll be another challenge tomorrow. All the more reason to stay on top of things and how candidates are showing up in the marketplace. Do you have any kind of final thoughts, parting thoughts on this one before we land the plane? And I'll tell you, the story that I shared at the beginning of this segment about the individual who used, basically, like, it appears as though they used like a chat GPT to craft the resume. From speaking with the management at that company, this person, it was like night and day from the person on paper to the person who showed up. And that's the risk that you run of trusting paperwork, is that you don't evaluate that person, get to know them, ask the right questions in the hiring process. And if you have questions about what to ask or how to conduct the hiring process, reach out to us. We can help you there. But we're just in an age where it is easy to fake your way into an interview and then ultimately land a job. So if you want to take care of your business, if you want to take care of your team, definitely reach out to us. We can support.
Thanks for that, Joey. I think if I was to just say one thing before we go, to give our listeners some real practical tips to take away, it would be to really prioritize things like in-depth references, to have folks provide work samples, and even skill demonstrations. So any sort of assessments that can be done like during the hiring process to really showcase their skills, I think will help us make more informed decisions and hopefully avoid a situation like the one you described earlier.
Yeah. So that's our episode for today. We've covered quite a bit and talked about, what's keeping HR up at night, and drilled into a big topic that's keeping HR up at night. And that's candidates using AI to get ahead in the recruiting process, maybe a little unethically, and how we should show up and respond. So if you like this episode, if it was helpful, share it with your team, get the conversation started about how to grow in these areas. But if you need help, reach out to us at jumpstart-hr.com. We'd be happy to schedule a 15-minute consult with you, or you can browse our many options of point-click buy solutions, which range from employee handbook updates, recruitment services, and our prepaid consulting time, and our monthly HR subscription. So until next time, I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.